Welcome back. Right now, President Trump's on his way to Saudi Arabia. This is the first stop on a 4-day swing through the Mideast. He hopes will yield about $1 trillion of deals for the U.S. Earlier today, he did not rule out a stop in Turkey, where he would potentially drop in on a sit-down between President Zelensky and Putin. It's all part of what he's calling a series of historic events that have unfolded over about the last 48 hours.
On Saturday, my administration helped broker a full and immediate ceasefire, I think a permanent one, between India and Pakistan. In addition, yesterday we achieved a total reset with China after productive talks in Geneva. Both sides now agreed to reduce the tariffs imposed. And third, I'm very happy to announce that Idan Alexander, an American citizen who until recently most thought was no longer living, thought was dead, is going to be released.
All right, let's bring in Bret Baier. He's Fox News chief political anchor and executive editor and anchor of Special Report. He joins us now live from Riyadh, ahead of the president's visit. Bret, obviously the White House touting these 5, as I count them, major wins over the last 48 hours. What's the energy like?
Yeah, Jillian, the president will arrive here tomorrow to Riyadh. By the way, we're in Diriyah, which is the birthplace of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. It goes back to 1766. And the president and the crown prince, as well as other leaders and the president's cabinet and CEOs, will have dinner here at the palace, the mud brick palace going back all those years, tomorrow night. But as he comes here, the conversation here is likely going to focus on trade deals and not peace deals, and investment that Saudi has pledged, and there will be a lot of it. They'll also probably be talking about Iran, the threat from Iran, and if something can come to pass about dismantling the Iranian nuclear program. But as you said, the big question mark really comes in Thursday, whether Ukraine and Russia can get to some kind of ceasefire in Turkey, and whether the president decides he wants to go and be a part of that. As far as normalization with Israel, it's a step away here in Saudi Arabia, because obviously the great news about the American hostage being released from Hamas today is significant, but there are other hostages. There's a lot left there, and that will take time, according to officials here. So,
Bret, the president's critics, though, unsurprisingly, don't necessarily agree everything's coming up roses. Take a listen to Democratic Senator Chris Murphy.
This is President Trump's corruption tour of the Middle East. He is going to the Gulf in order to collect tribute. What's happening here is an extraordinary level of corruption. We shouldn't pretend this is business as usual. What the president is doing is giving countries like Saudi Arabia and UAE what they want.
What do you say to that, the idea that this is the president in one of his first official trips really sort of going to pay homage to these leaders?
Yeah, listen, Jillian, there are concerns not just from Democrats. There are some Republicans who are weighing in as well, and that stems from that news that Qatar is going to gift the United States Defense Department the $400 million plane that President Trump wants to make the new Air Force One, as Boeing has stalled on making a new one. You heard him defend that today, referencing golf, saying Sam Snead said if they give you the putt, pick up the putt and walk away. It's not the same. There is the emoluments clause in the Constitution, and there will likely be legal challenges and definitely challenges on Capitol Hill. But so far, he's essentially saying, I'm not answering that question. I'm doing what I think is best for the country. I think there'll be a lot of criticism and a lot of challenge to that as he goes along, especially if he picks up other things or his business does along the way, tangential to him on this Middle East trip.
So there's on the issue of the jet, there's a lot of crazy foreign gifts, over the past decades. Different administrations always grapple with how to handle them. I remember that shortly after I started at the White House back in 2006, President Bush had just received a puppy. It lived in the White House Situation Room for a couple of days while officials figured out what to do with it. Do you think it would have made a difference here if the president hadn't said anything about it? Meaning if it just came in, the jet got flown to the Pentagon, and then we heard about it when we heard about it.
I don't know. I just think the size of this gift, the $400 million, and it's probably more than that, this luxury jet that the president wants to make Air Force One would have gotten a lot more attention than the puppy. But I think that any gift comes under scrutiny with the president, with any leader, and it is going to continue to happen. I just don't think that this president, just listening to his answers today, Jillian, cares that much, and he's going to fight the fight and say, I'm doing what I think is best. We'll see how long that lasts. We'll see how big the critics, pushback is, but there will be pushback, 100%.
There always is. Bret, thank you for taking time out of this trip to talk to us. We really appreciate it.
See you tonight on Special Report.
You got it.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.